This happened a few years ago. I used to work at a Target store in the town where I grew up. My name's Jesse, and I started working there after high school. It wasn't a glamorous job. A lot of my friends worked there when I was in school. Some of them were still there, actually. So it seemed like a decent place to work. I was in the electronics department, stocking shelves mostly, and occasionally helping a customer or two. One of my coworkers, Cam, was always a bit shady. He was in his mid-20s, and he had a forced tough guy persona. He and I never really got along. I'm a real tough guy, so fake tough guys like him bother me. We didn't work in the same section, so it was not a huge problem. Everyone knew Cam was dealing drugs on the side, but nobody ever said anything. I tried to stay out of his way, and he did the same for the most part. One day, however, Cam was fired. I didn't know the details, but I assumed it had something to do with his drug dealing. One of the other guys told me that Cam was dealing while he was at work. I wouldn't have noticed if he was, because we didn't really see each other. There was also a rumor around the store that he had been caught stealing. I don't know which one, if either was true, or maybe it was both. I didn't really care one way or another that he was fired. If anything, I was a little happy because I didn't like him. It wasn't a huge vendetta, though. Nothing like that. Things went on like normal for a while. I kept working at the store, and I was also applying for college at the time. I was taking a few high school classes to bump up my grades as well. I would often stay up late studying. One night, I started to notice a car circling my neighborhood. I was sitting at my desk, which was right in front of the window. The same car kept driving by. I couldn't tell who it was. I started to get paranoid, but I brushed it off. One day, a week later or so, I was working, and one of my coworkers told me that Cam thought I snitched on him for selling drugs at work. I laughed at first because it was ridiculous, but then I remembered the car. I thought Cam might be out to get me. That same night when I finished work, I left the store and started walking to the bus stop. I was in the parking lot and it was around 9 p.m. The sun was mostly set and the parking lot was mostly empty. I sensed a presence behind me, so I turned around. Cam was there with two other guys, walking my way. Before I could react, they jumped me. They hit me in the face and stomach, and I fell to the ground. I tried to fight back, but there were three of them, and they were too strong. They kicked me in the ribs and the back. I thought I was done for, but somehow I managed to break free and run away. I didn't look back until I was a safe distance away. I could see them standing there watching me. They didn't even run away, and they didn't chase me. They were disturbingly casual, like they did this all the time. I stumbled away and got to the bus stop. I was shaking, and I had blood on my face and clothes. The next few days were a blur. I stayed home, afraid to leave the house. I didn't know what those guys would do to me if they saw me again. Some of my friends said I should call the police, but I didn't think it was a good idea. I suspected that Cam may have been in some kind of gang, and it can be pretty dangerous to mess around with that stuff. I decided to chalk this one down to experience and move on. I quit my job at Target soon after, and moved away for college only a few months later. It was really good timing, because I didn't want to be in that town anymore after what happened to me. I worked part-time at Walmart during my senior year of high school. The store was a few miles away from my neighborhood, but I was usually able to get there on my bike, depending on what time of year it was. It was a pretty good job, all things considered. I didn't make much, but it was enough for me to get by while I was living with my parents. My coworkers were mostly other guys and girls from my school, or from the other high school in our town. We all got along pretty well. We were a diverse group of people, ranging from outgoing and extroverted to shy and introverted. The store itself was typical of any Walmart. It had endless aisles of products and checkout lanes. Most of the customers were friendly and polite, and my coworkers and I worked hard to ensure they had a decent experience. We were a tight-knit group, and we knew how to have fun while also getting the job done. But there was one person who made our job a nightmare. That was our manager, Bob. Bob was a tall, imposing man with a large belly and a bald head. He was around 50 years old, and his face was always at least a pale pink, often closer to red. He was quick to anger and had a temper that could be set off by the slightest provocation. Bob was a ticking time bomb, and we never knew when he was going to explode. One time the cart corral in the parking lot was full. Bob noticed, and he was furious. I was in the break room, and he stormed in. Bob slammed his fist on the table and yelled at us about how lazy and incompetent we all were. It was so loud that customers in the store could probably hear it. Another time, I was stocking the shelves when Bob came up to me and asked why a certain product was not on the shelf. I told him that I would put it out soon. My shift had just started, so it wasn't even slightly my fault. He didn't care though. He grabbed a box out of my hands and slammed it on the ground. Then he yelled at me for a good 5 minutes. I genuinely had no idea what was wrong with that guy. It's like he was looking for an excuse to get angry. If everything was perfect, I'm sure he would find a reason to explode on someone. Another terrible Bob episode happened to my coworker Ted. Ted was a shy, introverted guy who never spoke out of turn. He was a hard worker who kept his head down and never talked back. One day Ted was out on the floor stocking shelves. Bob called him into his office and screamed at him for 15 minutes straight. I could hear Bob's voice echoing throughout the store, and Ted was in tears when he came out. To this day, I have no idea what Ted did wrong. I talked to him afterwards, and he had no idea either. Bob's yelling was pure nonsense as far as any of us could tell. After that incident, we all dreaded coming to work. We never knew when Bob was going to snap or what would set him off. Morale was low and turnover was high. Many of my coworkers quit around that time because they couldn't handle Bob's behavior. Another time I was stocking shelves in the cereal aisle when Bob came up behind me. He was already fuming about something else, or maybe it was just his baseline. I could tell he was looking for a target. Suddenly, he started grabbing boxes off the shelves and throwing them at me. I dodged out of the way mostly, but I knew I had to get out of there. So I ran into an open area where others could see. The other employees were there, and they could tell I was upset. They asked me what had happened, and I told them about Bob's outburst. They were all sympathetic, but nobody knew what to do about it. We all knew that Bob had a short fuse, but we never thought it would come to this. I told one of the other managers what happened, and I later found out that Bob was fired. It was a huge relief. None of us saw Bob again after that, even though we lived in a fairly small town. We have no idea what he did afterwards, but I hope he got the help he needed. Maybe his firing was enough for him to realize that he had a problem. I used to work the night shift at Walmart. It was a quiet job, and it paid decently. The best part was that I didn't have to deal with the chaos of customers, unlike when I worked days. Walmart can be an absolute nightmare at the busiest hours. I was more than willing to sacrifice sleep for the peace and quiet of the empty store. It was a pretty creepy place to be at night, though. I would hear strange noises from time to time. It was all in my head most of the time, I'm sure, but it did make me wonder. The place was the perfect setting for a horror movie. This story is about the closest thing to a horror movie that ever happened to me while I worked there. It was a usual night, and I was unloading a truck at the receiving dock. As I was going about my business, I noticed something strange out of the corner of my eye. I glanced back at the truck, and I thought I saw someone crouched behind one of the pallets. At first I thought it was just one of my coworkers playing a prank on me. There were 2 other guys working that night, but I was pretty sure they were in a different part of the store at the moment. I leaned in to take another look. I saw the heel of an old shoe sticking out where I thought I saw the figure. I was pretty sure there was someone in there. I was taken aback, wondering how someone could have managed to sneak into the back of the truck without being noticed. Suddenly, the man walked out. He appeared to be in his mid-30s, wearing ragged clothes and a thin, sucked-in face. He came out from behind the boxes, and I could see that he was visibly upset, yelling at me incoherently. I took a quick look at him, and he didn't seem to be armed, but I wasn't sure. "Hey, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to calm him down. But he continued to yell at me. I didn't know what his problem was. I took a step back, trying to avoid any confrontation. It was then that I realized that I was alone with him, and my coworkers were nowhere to be seen. I backed away slowly, inching towards the door to get help. Suddenly, the man charged towards me. There was about 30 feet between us. I turned and sprinted towards the door without even looking back. I didn't know what he was going to do to me, and I didn't want to find out. He could have had any number of weapons hidden in his jacket. I raced out onto the sales floor, which was basically deserted. I fumbled with my phone trying to get the number for the Walmart security office. I gave up though, because I needed to focus on running. I looked back and couldn't see the guy following me. It was somewhat of a relief, but I was also really worried that he was going to jump out of somewhere and attack me. I eventually made it to the security office and blurted out my story. The security guard called the police. Soon after, the police arrived. They searched the store, but never found the man. He must have gotten away before they got there. They searched the truck where I had seen him, but they didn't find anything there either. We figured that he had snuck into the back of the truck while it was stopped at the loading dock. There was a small gap between the truck and the store that a person could squeeze through if they really wanted to. It seemed that he was waiting to get in. I still can't explain what he was trying to do in there, and what he could possibly have wanted with me. Maybe there was no reason for it. Maybe he was just crazy. I still get scared when I think about what he would have done to me if he had the chance. I'm Dana, and I used to work at a Best Buy near Dallas. Let me tell you, Black Friday was always the craziest time of year. People would line up outside the store for hours before we even opened, hoping to snag the best deals. The energy was always electric, and I have to admit, I kind of enjoyed the chaos. It probably would have been more fun to watch on the news rather than being in the middle of it, though. One Black Friday in particular will always stand out in my mind. It was a few years ago now, but I still think about it all the time. I was working one of the tills that day, and it was a madhouse. People were running around grabbing items off the shelves. I saw one larger woman fall trying to run for something. I'm not sure what she was after, but I saw her fall. She was up in a split second though, determined to get back in there. I was doing my best to keep up with my work, but my line was growing. I looked over to one of the other sections and saw two customers. They seemed to be arguing over a set of computer speakers or something. They were both middle-aged men, both looking a little frazzled from the chaos of the day. They both seemed determined to get those speakers. One of them was tall, probably 6'2" and muscular looking. The other was around 5'8" and overweight. I watched the two men arguing. At first it was just words. I couldn't hear them, but I could see their mouths moving. But then, the argument escalated, and before I knew it, the two men were pushing each other around. The larger man managed to shove the overweight guy to the ground. When he fell, the people around him seemed to clear away from the commotion. At that point, I continued to check out some of my customers that had piled up at my register. It was hard to look away from a fight, but I had work to do. Not more than 30 seconds later, I heard a loud bang. It could only have been a gunshot. I didn't see it, but I knew it was. People scattered in all directions, and I dropped to the ground. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering a description of the man with the gun and the location of the store. The dispatcher told me that the police were on their way, and that the incident had already been reported. I wasn't the first one to call. That was good, because it meant that they would be there even sooner. I waited down on the floor for another minute or so before the police arrived. They rushed in, guns drawn, and found the shooter within seconds. Once the area was secure, I gave them my side of the story. I told them I'd seen the two men fighting, and then I heard the shot. That was really all I knew. I didn't know which one of them was the shooter, or if anyone was hit. I found out later that it was the overweight guy who shot the gun. It turned out that nobody was hit. He simply shot it up at the ceiling. I heard he claimed it was an accidental misfire, but I don't know if that's true, or if he was just trying to make up an excuse. Either way, that guy deserves some kind of punishment for what he did. Someone could have been killed, and it could have been me.